Most people make the same mistake the moment a woman's behavior changes. She becomes quieter, replies a little slower, spends more time by herself, and suddenly they convince themselves that she's losing interest. They assume the connection is fading, so they panic, they text more, they demand answers, they search for reassurance. But what if the very thing you're interpreting as rejection is actually the opposite? What if the distance isn't created because she feels less, but because she feels more? Here's something most people never understand about emotions. They don't always move people closer. Sometimes they make people step back. When feelings become stronger than expected, they become difficult to manage. The heart starts moving faster than the mind can keep up. That's when fear quietly enters the room. Think about it. It's easy to enjoy someone's company when there's nothing at stake. It's easy to smile, flirt, and have fun when your heart isn't invested. But the moment someone begins to matter, everything changes. Suddenly, every conversation feels important. Every misunderstanding feels bigger. Every possibility of losing that person becomes more painful than before. This is where many women begin protecting themselves without even realizing it. Not because they want to lose you, not because they're playing games. Because they're trying to protect a heart that's beginning to care more than it planned to. People often believe confidence means never feeling afraid. That's not true. Even emotionally strong people become cautious when they meet someone they genuinely value. The greater the emotional investment, the greater the fear of disappointment. That's simply how the human mind works. A woman who has been hurt before doesn't stop wanting love. She simply becomes more careful about giving her heart away. She may question her own feelings. She may wonder if she's moving too fast. She may create a little distance just to regain emotional balance before allowing herself to fall any deeper. And here's where so many men unintentionally destroy something beautiful. They mistake temporary emotional protection for permanent rejection. Instead of responding with calmness, they react with anxiety. Instead of creating safety, they create pressure. They begin asking questions she isn't ready to answer. They expect certainty while she's still trying to understand her own emotions. Pressure has a strange effect on someone who's already emotionally overwhelmed. It doesn't create clarity, it creates more fear. Real emotional strength isn't shown by forcing someone to explain themselves. It's shown by remaining grounded when uncertainty appears. It's shown by refusing to let fear control your actions. When you remain calm, you communicate something powerful without saying a word. You tell her, I'm not here to control you. I'm not here to rush you. I'm secure enough to allow your feelings to develop naturally. That kind of emotional security is rare. People remember how safe they felt around someone far longer than they remember the perfect words that were spoken. Love grows best in an environment where fear slowly loses its power. It doesn't grow through pressure. It doesn't grow through constant chasing. It grows through trust, consistency, patience, and quiet confidence. So the next time her behavior changes, don't rush to write the ending of a story that may only be entering its most important chapter. Learn to observe before you assume. Learn to understand before you react. Because sometimes the person creating a little distance isn't trying to escape you. They're trying to protect feelings that have become stronger than they ever expected. Sometimes the greatest sign that someone cares deeply is not how closely they stand beside you, but how carefully they guard the heart that's slowly falling for you. Now, if you truly understand that her distance isn't always rejection, you'll begin to notice something even more revealing. The silence isn't empty. Behind that silence, there's often a conversation happening that you'll never hear. While you're wondering why she seems different, she's asking herself questions she never expected to ask. Why am I thinking about him so much? Can I really trust these feelings? What if this ends the way it did before? Those questions don't come from someone who feels nothing. They come from someone who suddenly realizes their heart has become involved. The woman who doesn't care isn't replaying yesterday's conversation before she goes to sleep. She isn't wondering whether she smiled too much or said the wrong thing. She isn't paying attention to the little details. But when emotions begin to grow, the smallest moments suddenly become meaningful. A simple compliment stays in her mind. A thoughtful message gets read more than once. A brief moment of kindness becomes something she remembers days later. This is what emotional investment looks like. It isn't always loud. It isn't always obvious. Most of the time, it's quiet. The mind begins collecting memories because the heart has decided someone is becoming important. That's why you should never assume that silence means indifference. Sometimes silence is filled with thoughts, questions, hope, and fear all at once. She's trying to understand emotions that arrived without asking for permission. She may have promised herself she would never become attached so quickly again. She may have spent years building emotional walls after disappointment. Then someone comes into her life who quietly challenges everything she believed she had under control. That can be frightening. People often imagine falling in love as something that feels effortless from beginning to end. Real life is rarely like that. Genuine feelings often introduce uncertainty before they bring confidence. When someone begins to matter, you suddenly have something to lose. That's when the mind starts working overtime, trying to protect the heart from future pain. She may overthink your messages. If you reply differently than usual, she notices. If you seem distracted, she wonders whether she did something wrong. If you become quieter for a day, she starts creating explanations that may not even be true. Not because she's looking for problems, but because emotions naturally make people more aware of the person they care about. The mistake many men make is expecting emotional certainty while she's still processing emotional reality. Every person has a different pace when it comes to trust. Some people express their feelings immediately. Others need time to make peace with them. Neither approach is wrong. The important thing is recognizing that patience often reveals what pressure never can. When you constantly demand answers, you interrupt the natural process of emotional clarity. Instead of giving her space to understand her own heart, you replace curiosity with stress. Now she's no longer focused on what she feels. She's focused on defending herself from expectations. But when you stay grounded, something remarkable happens. Your calmness becomes permission for her to relax. She no longer feels forced to make decisions before she's emotionally ready. She begins to realize that your confidence isn't dependent on constant reassurance, and confidence like that creates safety. Remember this: people don't open their hearts because they're rushed. They open them because they feel understood. So don't become obsessed with every delayed reply or every quiet moment. Don't spend your energy trying to decode every small change in her behavior. Instead, pay attention to the bigger picture. Is she still remembering the little things about you? Does she still find reasons to stay connected? Does she still show care in quiet, consistent ways? Those actions often reveal more than perfectly chosen words ever could, because when a woman starts overthinking every interaction, questioning every emotion, and carrying your presence in her mind long after you've spoken, it may not be because she's pulling away. It may be because her heart is slowly realizing just how much you mean to her. Once you understand that she's constantly thinking and processing emotions behind the scenes, another piece of the puzzle begins to make sense. Her behavior may start looking inconsistent. One day she's warm, engaged, and fully present. The next day she seems quieter, more reserved, or emotionally distant. Most people see these changes and immediately assume they're dealing with mixed signals or mind games. But not every contradiction is manipulation. Sometimes it's simply the visible evidence of an invisible emotional battle. When the heart and the mind want different things, people often act in ways that even confuse themselves. Her heart may be pulling her closer while her mind is telling her to slow down. One part of her wants to trust the connection, while another part keeps reminding her of every disappointment she's experienced before. That's why you might notice moments where she naturally opens up, laughs more freely, shares personal stories, and seems completely comfortable around you. Then suddenly she becomes more cautious again. It isn't because her feelings disappeared overnight. It's because fear has a way of interrupting what love is trying to build. This is where emotional maturity becomes your greatest advantage. Anyone can react to confusing behavior with frustration. Anyone can accuse, chase, or demand explanations. But someone who understands human psychology realizes that emotions are rarely perfectly organized. Feelings don't always move in a straight line. Real relationships are filled with moments of certainty followed by moments of hesitation. That doesn't automatically mean something is wrong. Watch her actions more carefully than her temporary mood. A woman who is emotionally invested often reveals her feelings in small ways that are easy to overlook. She remembers details you mentioned weeks ago. She notices when something feels different about you. She asks subtle questions because she genuinely wants to understand your life. Even during periods when she seems quieter, you'll often discover that her care never completely disappears. Words can become complicated when emotions are involved. Actions usually remain honest. Think about the people who have mattered most in your own life. Were you always perfectly confident around them? Did you always know exactly what to say? Probably not. The more someone means to you, the greater the desire to avoid making mistakes. That pressure alone can make anyone appear inconsistent from the outside. The problem is that many relationships never survive this stage because assumptions replace understanding. Someone notices a little distance and immediately decides the connection is ending. They become defensive. They withdraw their kindness. They stop showing patience because they're trying to protect their own pride. But emotional walls built out of assumptions rarely protect love. They usually destroy it. Instead of asking yourself, why is she acting differently today? Ask yourself a better question. Has the foundation of her actions actually changed? Does she still respect you? Does she still make an effort, even if it's smaller than before? Does she still respond with kindness when she feels emotionally safe? Does she still find quiet ways to stay connected? Those answers matter far more than temporary emotional fluctuations. Strong relationships aren't built because two people never experience uncertainty. They're built because neither person allows temporary uncertainty to erase genuine connection. When you become emotionally steady, something powerful happens. You stop reacting to every wave because you've learned to trust the direction of the ocean. You understand that consistency doesn't mean someone behaves exactly the same every single day. It means that underneath changing emotions, their character and their care remain present. That's the difference between confusion and loss of interest. Loss of interest slowly removes effort. Emotional confusion still leaves traces of care. If you can recognize those quiet traces instead of becoming consumed by temporary inconsistency, you'll begin seeing what most people completely miss. Sometimes the person who seems hardest to understand is simply trying to balance a heart that's falling faster than their fears are willing to allow. And when you learn to see beyond the mixed signals, you'll often discover that love has been speaking through her actions long before her words were ready to catch up. Now that you understand why her behavior can seem inconsistent, the next question becomes even more important. How should you respond when you feel that distance? This is the moment where most relationships either become stronger or quietly begin to fall apart. Not because love disappeared, but because fear took control of someone's actions. The greatest temptation when you feel someone pulling away is to chase them. You want answers, you want reassurance, you want certainty. So you send another message. You ask if something is wrong. You start measuring every reply, every pause, every change in tone. Before long, your peace depends on how quickly your phone lights up. But here's what you need to understand. When someone is already wrestling with powerful emotions, adding pressure doesn't make those emotions clearer. It makes them heavier. Imagine someone standing at the edge of a lake, unsure whether to step into the water. If you keep pushing from behind, they don't suddenly feel safer. They become more resistant. They focus on protecting themselves instead of discovering what's possible. Human emotions work the same way. The harder you push for immediate certainty, the less emotional freedom the other person feels. Love cannot breathe where pressure fills the room. That's why emotional confidence is so attractive. It doesn't demand, it doesn't force, it doesn't constantly seek proof. It quietly says, I know my value, and I don't need to control your pace to believe in this connection. Think about the difference between someone who is secure and someone who is afraid. The fearful person is always trying to close the gap as quickly as possible. They believe that more messages, more questions, and more explanations will remove uncertainty. But uncertainty is not always solved through conversation. Sometimes it's solved through consistency. When your actions remain steady, even during moments of silence, you communicate something words never could. You tell her that your character doesn't change because circumstances do. You show her that you're not controlled by panic. You become someone whose presence feels stable instead of unpredictable. And stability creates trust. Many people underestimate how deeply emotional safety influences attraction. They focus on saying the perfect words or creating the perfect moment. Those things have value, but they don't build lasting connection by themselves. What builds lasting connection is knowing that someone won't turn every difficult moment into an emotional storm. Ask yourself this. If every time she became quiet, you became anxious, if every time she needed space, you treated it like betrayal, if every time uncertainty appeared, you demanded immediate answers, would she feel understood, or would she feel responsible for managing your emotions? Real strength isn't making someone carry your emotional weight. Real strength is carrying your own. That doesn't mean becoming cold or pretending you don't care. It means caring without becoming controlled by fear. It means allowing someone the freedom to process their emotions while continuing to show respect, kindness, and quiet confidence. Ironically, the less desperate you become for reassurance, the more reassuring your presence becomes. People naturally feel safer around those who remain emotionally grounded. They know they can be honest without creating unnecessary conflict. They know they can take a breath without losing the relationship. That kind of security allows feelings to grow naturally because fear is no longer dominating every interaction. Remember, patience isn't weakness. Patience is confidence stretched over time. It is the decision to trust your character more than your anxiety. It is refusing to let temporary uncertainty convince you that something meaningful has already been lost. When you stop trying to force every door open, you'll be surprised how many doors begin opening on their own. People move toward the places where they feel accepted, respected, and emotionally safe. They don't move closer because they were pressured. They move closer because they discovered there was no reason left to be afraid. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do for someone who is struggling with their feelings is not to chase them, but to become the calm that makes them feel safe enough to walk toward you on their own. Once you stop chasing certainty and start creating emotional safety, something remarkable begins to happen. The relationship enters a quieter stage, one that many people completely misunderstand. You may think nothing is happening because there are fewer dramatic conversations, fewer emotional highs and lows, and fewer moments where everything feels urgent. But beneath the surface, she's paying closer attention to you than ever before. This is where many women begin observing instead of speaking. She's no longer trying to figure out whether you're interesting. She's trying to figure out whether you're consistent. She's watching how you handle disappointment. She's noticing how you respond when things don't go your way. She's paying attention to whether your kindness disappears the moment you don't get immediate reassurance. Character is always revealed in ordinary moments. Anyone can be charming when everything feels exciting. Anyone can appear confident when they're receiving constant attention. But emotional maturity shows itself when life becomes quiet. It shows itself when patience is required. It shows itself when there are unanswered questions and you still choose respect over reaction. People don't just fall in love with how you make them feel during the best moments. They fall in love with how safe they feel during uncertain ones. That's why silence often becomes a test. Not a game, but a natural opportunity for truth to reveal itself. When communication slows down for a while, what do you become? Do you become suspicious? Do you become controlling? Do you allow your imagination to create stories that have no evidence? Or do you remain the same steady, grounded person she has been getting to know? Your response tells her more than your promises ever will. Words are easy. Almost anyone can say they're patient, loyal, or understanding. But real trust isn't built by declarations. It's built by repeated experiences. Every calm reaction becomes another reason for her to believe that you're someone she can rely on. Every respectful conversation becomes another brick in the foundation of trust. Every moment where you choose understanding instead of frustration quietly answers questions she may never even ask out loud. She's learning whether your confidence is real or whether it depends entirely on her constant attention. Because confidence that disappears the moment life becomes uncertain isn't confidence at all. It's dependence wearing the mask of confidence. Strong relationships are built by two people who know how to regulate their own emotions instead of expecting the other person to do it for them. When you become emotionally stable, you give her permission to become emotionally open. She doesn't have to worry that every difficult conversation will become an argument. She doesn't have to fear that every misunderstanding will threaten the connection. That kind of emotional stability is incredibly rare. In a world where so many people react instantly, remaining calm becomes unforgettable. While others are trying to impress with grand gestures, you're quietly demonstrating reliability. And over time, reliability creates something excitement alone never can. It creates security. Security doesn't remove attraction. It strengthens it. It allows attraction to grow into trust and trust into commitment. That's why emotionally healthy relationships often feel peaceful rather than dramatic. They're built on consistency instead of constant emotional chaos. So don't underestimate the power of your daily behavior, the way you listen, the way you keep your word, the way you stay respectful even when you're frustrated, the way you remain true to your values without demanding that someone else move at your pace. Those quiet choices speak louder than dramatic declarations ever could. Because the woman who is truly deciding whether to trust you isn't only listening to what you say. She's watching who you consistently become. And if your actions continue to reflect patience, strength, humility, and emotional stability, she'll eventually realize that the safest place for her heart isn't in running from her feelings. It's in placing them with someone who has already proven they know how to protect them. And this brings us to the moment everything has been leading toward. After the distance, the overthinking, the mixed emotions, the quiet observations, and the patient waiting, something begins to change. It doesn't happen because you forced it. It doesn't happen because you found the perfect words. It happens because fear slowly loses its grip and trust quietly takes its place. This is what so many people misunderstand about love. Love isn't just about attraction. Attraction can happen in a moment. Trust takes time. Attraction may bring two people together, but trust is what gives them the courage to stay. Until trust is stronger than fear, the heart will always hesitate. Think about every step we've talked about. She created distance because her feelings became overwhelming. She started overthinking because your presence mattered more than she expected. Her behavior seemed inconsistent because her heart wanted one thing while her fears whispered another. Then she watched how you responded. She paid attention to whether you would react with pressure, patience, insecurity, or confidence. Every stage had one purpose: to answer a single question. Is it safe for me to give this person my heart? That question is far more important than most people realize. People often believe relationships fail because there wasn't enough love. In reality, many relationships struggle because there wasn't enough emotional safety. Two people can care deeply for each other and still never build something lasting if fear keeps making every decision. Fear tells you to hide your feelings. Trust gives you permission to express them. Fear tells you to expect disappointment. Trust allows you to believe in possibility. Fear keeps score. Trust chooses understanding. This is why emotional maturity changes everything. When someone sees that your kindness doesn't disappear during difficult moments, that your respect doesn't depend on getting your way, and that your confidence remains steady even when life feels uncertain, something inside them begins to relax. The walls they once believed were necessary no longer seem as important. Not because they're weak, because they've finally found someone who doesn't make those walls necessary anymore. That's when conversations become deeper. Smiles become more genuine. Silence becomes comfortable instead of awkward. She no longer feels like she has to protect every emotion because she's discovered that vulnerability won't be punished. She's no longer spending all her energy wondering whether you're going to leave, change, or become someone different tomorrow. She starts believing that consistency is real, and once trust reaches that point, love stops feeling like a risk and starts feeling like home. Never underestimate how powerful that transformation is. The greatest gift you can offer another person isn't perfection, it's emotional stability. It's becoming someone whose actions consistently match their words, someone who listens before judging, someone who remains calm before reacting, someone who understands that lasting relationships aren't built through dramatic moments, but through thousands of ordinary choices made with integrity. Remember, anyone can chase attention, anyone can create excitement for a short time. But very few people know how to create peace. And peace is what allows love to grow roots deep enough to survive life's challenges. So if you ever find yourself wondering whether she's avoiding you or simply struggling with emotions she never expected to have, don't rush to fear the worst. Look at the bigger picture. Look at the consistency of her care. Look at the way she gradually lets you into parts of her life she once kept guarded. Look at the trust that's being built one quiet moment at a time. Because when a woman truly feels emotionally safe, she no longer has to choose between protecting her heart and opening it. She discovers she can do both with the right person. And that's the moment love stops being something she's afraid of and becomes something she's finally ready to embrace. So never chase love with pressure. Become the kind of person whose patience, character, and consistency make love feel safe enough to stay.